On one side you have high, sensitive, let's say, information, and on the other side you just have aggregate data which no one really thinks that is sensitive. Now, privacy protection, of course, is quite back when it comes to these issues, while privacy violators are systematically doing mining in order to do better marketing and sell you their stuff. And of course, they are well funded to do this. Okay? Now, just to conclude, because I only have 5 minutes, which I want to devote to questions, I think that traffic analysis as a discipline has really been neglected. I was having dinner with quite an expert in computer security, and we were having this discussion of, if all the traffic is encrypted in the networks, then even if you own a router, you can't really do much. Well, I hope my talk so far has convinced you that just encrypting the data is part of the solution, but is definitely not the whole solution to secure a system. Who's talking with whom, when, how, where they are, is already leaking a lot of information at all levels. Now, I spent quite some time talking about the military world. This is a closed community that I don't know much about. If you have more information about it, I'd be delighted to hear it. But I hope that we can apply some of the paradigms for covert communications to civilian networks as well, of course. And just a warning to say that the level of sophistication of the attacks we've seen is still not state-of-the-art. I'm sure that in the next few years we will do much better in terms of traffic analysis attacks, but it is already sophisticated enough for people just coming up with a clever idea to have quite a high probability of this idea already having been considered and broken before. So please, I urge you to work on this field. It's a fascinating field, but I also urge you to talk to people who are already in there and read what has been done so far, because it's quite worthwhile and non-obvious. Okay? Securing communications against traffic analysis is still expensive and very fragile. Tor is a deployed network, and it's a great product to use, but it is definitely no silver bullet, and we are working on doing better, but it's not an easy task. And of course, because it is not an easy task to technologically protect our networks, it is extremely important to at least have policies that protect our networks, okay? To not be logging traffic data, to make it harder to get at the traffic data. Sadly, today we're in a policy environment that does exactly the opposite. It mandates people to retain the traffic data and makes it easy for all sorts of people to access it. And this fact, along with the fact that there is a full-scale information warfare in peer-to-peer networks, make covert networking and all that stuff, even more important to deploy. Thank you. We have maybe a few minutes for questions.
Hi. I want to come back to the topic of secure shell and identifying users by their way of typing and the time shift that they present by typing. So I don't know if this has been addressed before, but maybe it's just possible by shifting the packets automatically by the secure shell application with some kind of SHA-512 checksum and some microseconds which you get out of the checksum. So my question is, what are the time differences that I measure to identify a person? What are the numbers I need?
Right. So I think you're completely right. There are countermeasures that one could deploy. So the timing differences are extremely subtle. I don't have the numbers exactly, but they're just milliseconds basically as you type. And of course you need a lot of aggregate data and quite a lengthy email to perform accurate identification according to Rubin. Okay? I think what is really important is, despite the fact that the countermeasures are, as you say, quite simple to implement, just add enough jitter at random and all these things, it was not even a security requirement when Secure Shell was being designed. Okay? So it's not the case that the countermeasure in this particular case is really hard to implement. It was just never considered an issue. And OpenSSL and SSL as a protocol and TLS, its successor, is exactly the same. in that you can see in the standard that it actually warns you that it doesn't protect against traffic analysis. It's in the introduction and the preamble. Yet there is actually no attempt to shift it towards protecting a bit more.
Hey, George. I have a different kind of question for you. Whoa. Hey. Okay. Hey, George. You spoke a lot of traffic analysis and a lot of different issues in the field. I would like to actually ask you how you believe this research can be directed to actual content inspection. And what I mean by that is not necessarily IDS or dissecting protocols, but rather, for example, there is a lot of data in the world and a lot of trouble collecting it. But once it's collected, the actual trouble is getting the information you need. So it's not always about getting more data to establish a baseline for how people type, but rather what's actually interesting in all that. So have you done any work, or do you know of others who have done work in that particular field? Oh, hey. Thanks.
So, okay. What I do not want you to think when you come out of here is to say, oh, this George dude, you know, he talked in general terms about, you know, trends and ideas that may actually work out or not. So this is a network diagram. It was basically mined from the mailing list of a large political network in the media. And when they saw actually this diagram, they pretty much freaked out. Not that they have much to hide, but you know, being political types, they're a bit aware of privacy in communications. So indeed, and maybe your question is kind of related to this, you know, this is pretty, but it doesn't tell you much. Okay, this is basically network diagrams with some heuristics on which links matter, which links don't matter between mailing lists and people. So the names are quite small in order to avoid the privacy violation, and you won't find these slides online. What we do then is basically we apply a whole sequence of heuristics and all that stuff to that data in order to extract high-level intelligence. So basically this is pretty much the same diagram. It's actually not homomorphic, but as you can see, it's much more simplified. And we actually took this real data and tried to just keep what is important, i.e. finding out the people who turn out to be bridges between two different spaces in this network. Okay, and we came up with a list of 100 people in order that you should shoot in order to actually completely fragment this network. So yes, traffic analysis has a lot in common with the field of information retrieval and data mining. It is just that it is specialized on looking at traffic patterns instead of the actual contents of documents. And yes, there has been a fair amount of work in doing traffic analysis on that stuff and target selection. Other questions? Yes?
Less of a question, more of a follow-up to the question about SSH. There's probably some SSH experts in the crowd, so please stop me if I'm wrong, but I believe when SSH is entering a password, as in keyword, as in the password authentication scheme, the password is sent as a burst. Mm-hmm. But when you're typing in a password, for example, tunneling one SSH session within another, the keyboard strokes have gone through. So you can't add noise, because SSH doesn't know where the password is.
That's right.
And if you do add noise to everything, then SSH becomes annoying.
It depends how much noise I think would make the product unusable. It's not clear that the signal that you have from individual keystrokes is actually that much. So maybe introducing a tiny little bit of noise would help enough and not make the thing unusable. You have to go back to, I guess, the timing analysis that Rubin did to find out if it would be annoying all the time or not. But yes, you'd have to do it all the time.
Back to this very interesting example about the Indymedia network. Is it then different if the whole network, everybody, or the hosts in the network, they use Tor then? Is that then a solution, or does that bring out other exposable What is
So that was actually exactly the purpose of our research when we did this analysis. We tried to look at to what extent the network would be susceptible to target selection, i.e. someone observing who's using the mailing list, who's actually really important in that network and who's not, and going and taking them away or telling them not to participate anymore. And we wanted to exactly answer the question you asked, whether using an anonymous communication system would protect them. And the question is, well, the answer is a bit, but not very much. So the attacker would have a very much harder time to find who basically to disrupt, but after a while they would anyway find who to disrupt just by the amount of communications they would be doing. Now, using Tor for this purpose is not quite right because we're talking more about email-like communication, so it would be more like remailers. But I urge you actually to read a paper that I've written called The Economics of Mass Surveillance, which discusses exactly that whole thing, and all the nuances are in there. It's not a very simple question to answer, but basically the answer is a bit negative. It's not clear that just using anonymizing technologies would help all that much. We hope we can make them better so that they do help. Sorry. Okay, so I see no more. Oh, I see more hands, maybe, or not. I don't know. No? Oh, yes.
Hello, thanks for your interesting talk. A question to the measurement of time delay between computers to identify them as the same machines. Does NTP have any effect on your measurements?
Right. So I'm not sure if you actually refer to the attack that relies on the quartz crystals or the attacks that rely on the IPID signatures.
To the quartz crystals.
Right. I guess Stephen is the resident specialist here, so I should stand corrected. Maybe you want to actually talk that question, because otherwise I'll embarrass myself. Stephen has spent a long time with a hairdryer pointed at a computer and a stopwatch, basically. And he's going to get a PhD out of it very soon.
It was actually a desk lamp. It was a desk lamp I had pointed at the computer. The question of NTP is slightly complicated. Firstly, the timestamps that... Closer. The timestamps that I was looking at were from the TCP timestamp field, and that commonly happens on OpenBSD, Windows and Linux before NTP correction. But even if NTP correction were applied, as it is for the ICMP clock or the TCP initial sequence number clock, then it should be possible to remove that, because NTP is not designed to filter out effects that are as fast as I was measuring. So even though it's over a few hours, NTP is designed to smooth things over several days, because if it reacted very fast, it would have problems because of network latency for the NTP connections, and the clock would become unstable. And unstable clocks are generally worse than slightly inaccurate clocks.
Okay. I'm being told that our time is up, so just one final announcement. We have a quite large now research group at KU Leuven, which is next to Brussels, looking at traffic analysis issues. We're looking for bright people who would like to join us to do traffic analysis research. If you think you're interested in doing that, please talk to me or send me an email. Also, the first and best place to talk about anonymous communications and traffic analysis is the Privacy Enhancing Technologies Workshop. It's going to be in June, I think, in Ottawa, Canada this year, so please come. The anonymity bibliography is really important. If you want to do anything on traffic analysis or anonymity, go and check it out. And of course, I, as well as Roger,